Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Moving into the Future. Today, we are joined by Laura Patel from Density and a PropTech enthusiast. We're going to have a nice conversation about the PropTech industry today and how it's been growing rapidly during the pandemic and what the future holds. Laura, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is really great. You, I must say, are the first guest who I actively recruited to get on here. I've always been very, I followed along you on LinkedIn and been very interested in what you do in your posts. So really, thank you for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, I'm blushing.
Yeah. Let's add some depth. You've been in the PropTech industry now for almost 15 years, I suppose it's been.
Yeah.
Which
makes
is
me sound very old.
No, it's really interesting because when you started, PropTech wasn't even a word yet. You had got your start at Dirt, and just so I'm understanding it correctly, Dirt is a technology company that helps build off-site and then ship efficiently. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So to your earlier point, yes, PropTech really has only come about in the last 3 years, maybe 5 tops. Previously, we didn't really have a word to coin what that represented, just because it didn't have ubiquitous adoption in the industry yet. Dirt specifically, what they do is they recognize that there was an opportunity for innovation in the construction space. Construction in the way that we build really hasn't innovated in over 100 years. If you look back to the inception of drywall, which was like the last huge innovation in the space, that happened in, I think it was like 1916 or 1909, somewhere around there. And we really haven't seen anything like that dramatically accelerated the efficiency, reduced cost, and improved the quality of the product. And so Dirt recognized that there was an opportunity to bring in BIM technologies and different types of automations within the design process, but then have that link directly through to offsite manufacturing, where you're leveraging all of the speed, efficiency, and reliability of a factory environment, which is why they don't build every single individual person's car in their driveway. Right. And so they're just trying to take a lot of what we've learned from the automotives industry and bring it into construction.
Yeah, that's so cool. And, you mentioned that in terms of the real estate industry as a whole has really had a hard time. And, before the last 3 to 5 years where we've seen some growth is adapting and innovating with new technologies to create these efficiencies. You mentioned construction. Moving is in the same boat, where it's just been done you mentioned drywall. The dolly for us was like this huge, innovation that allowed us to work more efficiently. And, since then, there really hasn't been much, or at least nothing that's been industry standard. So, that's really interesting. And now, through your time at Dirt, how did you see, what was it that you were like, okay, wow, we're really onto something here. Wow, this is something I'm really passionate about. What did you see in your time there that really, grew your passion for the PropTech industry?
I guess I would say 2 things. The first is getting to know the real estate space. I fell backwards into real estate. It wasn't something that I had sought in my career. I did a degree in finance. I thought I was going to work in banking, and then kind of just stumbled into real estate and fell in love. But you start to recognize, the more familiar you become with the space, that it is incredibly fragmented and decentralized. There's tons of layers of decision making. It's frankly very inefficient in a lot of ways because of that. And one of the things that I became very acutely aware of was this gap that exists between the design and the A&D side of the space, and what they're sort of creating early in a project's life cycle, and then how that very starkly gets transitioned to the team that's actually going to build and make that vision a reality. And so the thing that I think solidified for me that Dirt really had a promising future, and a lot of other companies have popped up in the same vein since, like Falk Built, which is another amazing company, was the fact that it helped to tie those 2 parts of the industry together, where they were all happening under the same kind of super subcontractor, and you were using technology to ensure that exactly what the designer designed was exactly what got built by the machine. So it just created that harmonious connection between again, what could otherwise be very, very complicated, nuanced process with a lot of human beings that are just innately prone to make mistakes involved. And then the second thing that I think was really interesting was we started to see a lot of data come out from, the McKinseys and the Boston Consulting Groups and the World Economic Forum talking about how the millennial generation weren't going into the trades. There was this huge push globally, but especially in North America, to push people into white collar positions that required university education. Right. And so you started to have this knowledge gap that was emerging with a lack of people entering the workforce. All the while, you started to see that the baby boomers were retiring. Right. And so it started to become pretty obvious that if you looked out 10 years, because people were already starting to feel it, but there was going to be a huge labor shortage in the construction space. And so the other thing, I guess, to summarize that I liked about it is a lot of the time technology gets villainized a bit because automation is replacing humans in the process. And one of the things I really liked about kind of focusing on this side of the construction spaces, you were using automation to fill a gap where there were roles that people no longer wanted.
Right. And that's like one of the most important things about technology is, creating those efficiencies and filling those gaps. And, I think that is part of the hesitancy to PropTech that many people has had is, it's taking jobs, or it's making our service irrelevant in some sense, or obsolete. And I think that's been some of the hesitancy towards PropTech, and why we've seen this slow, just increase in usage and acceptance. Would you agree with that? Because again, you've been in it for a while now, and it has been a slow adoption. What do you think is the cause for the just the unwillingness to embrace it fully?
So why PropTech really hasn't exponentially taken off yet? It's a complicated question. I think there's a number of reasons. Innately, there just wasn't, if we kind of like take it back to how small companies or innovation happens in tech, it's obviously a lot of the time venture funded. I think at its core, there was a lack of VC interest in the real estate space for many years. I think kind of going back to what we were talking about with a lot of people not finding real estate or construction particularly sexy. When you're choosing your career path, you didn't have a lot of entrepreneurs that were like, I really want to come out with a real estate technology. So there was a lack of innovation on the founder side, and then there was a lack of money available to support those businesses. So that's kind of at the core of when you start to see entrepreneurship emerge within a space, that was lacking. And then when you kind of fast forward, you have the companies that have been created. You're starting to see a bit of momentum with investment and with innovation in the space. The reason I think it hasn't taken off is the real estate industry is incredibly risk averse at its core. You look at how slowly we do innovate, why there are so many layers of decision making. Ultimately, those all serve to hedge against risk. And so that when you have a brand new idea that could be radically disruptive, I think that there's a bit of an affront to the traditional way that real estate operates innately baked into that. And then beyond that, in real estate, I mean, everything is on kind of a long term. The buy cycle is very long. The implementation cycle, because we're physically like doing things in a space, is very long. And then the payback is going to be years as opposed to months. And so when you think about technology, it's changing rapidly. It's changing on a weekly, monthly basis. And yet you're talking about selling it into a space where they may not realize the benefits for 2 years out. It takes a pretty visionary, assertive, strong leader who really believes in the benefits that it has to afford to be like, I'm going to do that. I would sort of liken it a bit to solar. Solar has a longer payback. You have to really believe in the fact that this is how we're going to power our buildings in the future to make that investment now. Again, very complicated answer because there's just so many reasons. But I think the pandemic actually served as a nice accelerator to adoption in the same way that we saw fintech take off amid the financial crisis in 2008. So I think the years to come are really bright.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say too, because you had mentioned like the use of space is what really interested you, in the PropTech world, and I definitely see that. And now too, coming out of the pandemic, you say how it's accelerating the PropTech industry. That couldn't be more true, just because a lot of buildings right now are sitting empty, and that is, you talk about that risk aversion. These are big risks that people are taking on, so they're looking for solutions to fix this. And PropTech and services like Density that offer, space utilization and space occupancy software to understand how these buildings are operating, how people are using the spaces, becomes so much more valuable now, because you're giving depth to the building itself. And, that building is now telling you a story as far as how it's being utilized and how it's functioning and why it may be functioning in certain areas. And it's, it's not just density. There are other technologies that work together to tell this story. And I think that's becoming very appealing to companies, because it's all unknown right now. And, no company or no building or, landlord or developer has the answer. So we're all kind of searching right now. And I think that's kind of the state of the industry right now, and why companies like Density are so appealing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, so I currently work for Density, amazing company, just huge rocket ship that's taken off, especially amid the pandemic, but even before. And basically, Density allows organizations to have an analytics layer that's humming above their physical real estate, letting them aggregate data anonymously on how their spaces are used and use that to make decisions. I think to answer your point, one of the things that originally attracted me to Density is real estate is, for most organizations, their second largest operating expense, with people being the most. And yet, historically, none of them have known how their spaces are used. And so it's the only part of kind of how you manage most businesses where it's sort of a black hole. We have no visibility or data into whether or not it's, productive, it's, deriving a return on investment. And I think the pandemic actually cast a spotlight on that. C-suites had a lot of questions about real estate as we started to do this mass exodus event going into the first few months of the pandemic, and real estate teams were completely ill-equipped to respond to them because they didn't have literally any data about how their spaces were being utilized. And so I think it opened up a lot of budget because it exposed this gap in how the businesses were being managed. And then I think as we start to see people coming back to the office, we're entering unprecedented times. And I mean, we've kind of been living through them together, but the way that we work is fundamentally going to change. It obviously has always changed. It's evolved, but it's evolved really slowly. If you look back on like workplace trends, they were usually over the course of a year, if not 20 years. Right. We're going to see wild changes, and we've already started to see the start of that just in the next 5 years. And so organizations recognizing that they can have this information and this technology available today, they want to be able to operate their spaces with a lot more agility. And they're only going to be able to do that if they have a feedback loop implemented like a Density to be able to understand, on a weekly or monthly basis, how their space is serving the needs of their team members and make adjustments accordingly. Right.
And that's what I was going to mention, having that data to really pool, whether it be a week or a month or a quarter or a year, is going to be so valuable to companies to see how their spaces are utilized. And one of the things you mentioned too is the evolution of the workspace and how it's really happening before our eyes. And I had this conversation with Kevin last time. Millennials as a whole have really, forced this change in how we work even before the pandemic. You think of things like even the casual attire or business attire that we've, promoted and working from anywhere, which was, a little bit taboo before the pandemic, but now we've proven is very doable and, very possible. These sort of things, are ways that we've pushed the envelope and are going to continue to push the envelope. and we were having the discussion as to why that is. Why else do you think that is? Do you think it is, technology based? Do you think it is just because of how we've grown up with technology and used technology, and we're always on, so therefore when we're in the office, it needs to be a purpose, and I want to come dressed like this because I dress like this when I'm working at home too, and like that's just part of how we work now. Do you think that's the case, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, poor millennials. We've gotten a bad rap, I think, for some of the negatives that we've brought to the office, like necessitating 100 different kinds of nuts and wanting to bring our dogs to work. But I think a lot of the changes have been very positive, and they'll benefit generations to come.
I do too.
As far as why we've wanted those things in our workplace, I think and this is not a particularly revolutionary concept. I think a lot of people have already spoken to this, but it is because we don't have that, clear work-life divide anymore.
Right.
Like, we're not clocking out at 5 o'clock and heading home to live our real life.
Exactly.
And so we're expecting to be able to infuse more of our real life into our 9 to 5 and our whatever hours we are, I'm making bunny ears, but our professional selves. Where I think we're pushing the envelope with technology is the more you start to decentralize where you're working, where you're not doing it at your individual workstation, it means that you're going to have technology throughout the workplace, and then now extending into your home that's going to support however you typically get your work done. I think it's going to become even more important as people come back to the office. I was moderating a panel recently, and one of the things that I thought was really striking is, as much as we all complained about Zoom and we all found it kind of dehumanized our work experience, we got kind of used to the luxury of having a frame that had every single individual person that was participating in the meeting's face with their title and their company and their name. And so it made it really easy to collaborate virtually. And now that we have people going back to the office, I think that we're going to have to come out with new technologies that allow for that same experience for people that are working from home who want to be participating in a meeting that may be happening partially in real life. And so the parallel that came out in this panel that I thought was really striking was, if I'm sitting at home and for whatever reason, be it personal or, maybe it's this fall and some people still aren't comfortable being in person and heading back to the office, I don't want to be disadvantaged from the fact that I'm not sitting around the boardroom table and I don't know who some of the individuals are that's speaking, and I don't have the luxury of a Zoom screen
Right.
that's telling me that that's actually Jack that's talking right now. And so as much as we've set up the workplaces really infused with technology to support work as it's evolved over the last few years, I think we're entering into a stage where not just is there going to be huge investment on the companies with kitting out their offices, but there's actually going to need to be more innovation on the technology front to address these needs, because we'd never had them before.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be really interesting too, and how companies reconfigure their spaces to fit these technology needs, whether it is like better acoustics or, some sort of software that allows for, virtual communication to be a little bit easier, or whatever it may be. It's all going to be very interesting. I mean, I know recently we saw Mark Zuckerberg came out with the VR glasses that are going to be used for, conference rooms, and we can be anywhere and put the VR glasses on and it'll be like we're in the room.
Yeah.
That's certainly some next level stuff. But the other proponent to that is, the furniture aspect. And I think that's where we come in at the advanced group and how we work together at Density. So just to add some depth, I do work with a few individuals at Density, because the way that I see it working is the information that they gather from Density as to how their space is working. We can be very flexible and dynamic in terms of reconfiguring that space quickly. So again, whether it is on a weekly or monthly or quarterly or yearly basis, we work together where Density provides the data and then the advanced group provides the services in order to reconfigure that spaces. And that's what we've been seeing a lot through the pandemic, is making spaces much more configurable. I think we talked about it, like Google has been doing this for years, where like all of their desks are on wheels and conference room tables are on wheels and stuff like that, and can be foldable. And I think it already is becoming so prevalent between that type of flexibility and then also the personalized workstations between like the phone booths and those private type of rooms where, you know, an employee can go in and get that private work done. While also, though, and I think this is going to be the key moving forward, is having good lighting and really good acoustics and stuff like that. So when you are holding those Zoom meetings, you know, it doesn't interfere with the work being done. What else have you been seeing, you know, from the data garnered from density? And this would probably be with more of your bigger clients, that, you know, the data they've got and how they've applied it to their spaces. I mean, I could imagine it's a lot of like space efficiency. So like, you know, maybe it's, okay, we don't need that second floor, or maybe we do. You know, what have you been seeing with your bigger clients that has been valuable to them based off density's technology?
I would bucket it into two different camps. One is kind of those macro portfolio level insights, which is your head of global real estate is really focused on. So, okay, they're almost like the bat phone where they're getting a call once a day, especially with the larger firms, from some business unit who's telling them that they're dying for more space. Having, again, it's totally anonymous, but it at least is by department. If you're, for example, if you have a finance team that's situated in Hong Kong, you understand that the data related to that office pertains to the utilization of that finance team. And so when that head of finance calls you and says, we're bursting at the seams, we need more space, you have this objective source of data to refer back to and helping to inform that decision, validating that need, or from a position of, again, it's not, you're removing emotion from it, you're falling back on the data, being able to come back to the negotiating table with your internal client and saying, like, actually the data doesn't substantiate that need. So I think we've seen a lot of that in terms of right-sizing portfolios, less so downsizing. So, hey, you know, in our Texas office, we're only at 60% utilized. We need to pare down that lease. The reality of lease terms makes it a bit less fluid with being able to make those adjustments unless you're in a flexible office. But we've seen it be an enormous tool to hedge against unnecessary growth. And there's huge implicit cost savings in that relative to, you know, expanding your leases. And then also the construction, the moving cost, et cetera, et cetera. If you take it more micro, I find that very interesting, which is really understanding the workplace. And that's kind of what you were alluding to before. And that's where I think we're going to see the most interesting data kind of come out of this return to office post-pandemic. The types of things that we see are, okay, our conference rooms are crazy well utilized. Maybe they're utilized 80% of the time during working hours or more. But we're able to take that a step further and say your 6-person conference room is actually 73% of the time only used by one person. Yeah. And so if you're a Facebook or a LinkedIn or one of these high collaboration tech companies, especially where your team members, even before pandemic, were really only coming into the office to work with their peers, those communal, like shared amenity spaces and collaboration spaces are wildly expensive assets if they're sitting vacant. And so being able to understand misutilization is actually more important and a more telling data point. And back to your point, the quick fix to that is, okay, great, we invest in a couple $100 phone booths, and hopefully that alleviates the issue such that you're able to have more team-based work occurring in those rooms.
Yeah, and I think that again is going to be a massively important function of the workplace moving forward, is its purpose. And I've mentioned this before, I say it on the podcast all the time. It's almost essentially going to be like a retail space. Like, how are you building an office out that draws employees in? You know, whether it is for its function, which is obviously going to be a major percentage of that reason, but also the amenities around it. And we were talking before about how millennials have changed the workplace. A lot of that stemmed from the engineers in the tech world who were like, I need this and I want that.
Which is still kind of the case. They're super hard to recruit.
It is. And they know how competitive, they know their worth, more so than anybody else in the workplace.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, that's why you see the cafeterias and you see the gyms or this and that. But those are also going to be very appealing tools to get people back into the office. When I was at Indeed, they had like Wednesday night HIIT classes and yoga and stuff like that. And like, that's a huge draw, to come in and, you can combine that with the collaboration that you want in the workplace, and also, enhancing your culture through that. So, I think that those are going to be really cool tools, and also how density can help by saying like, okay, this event was really, really positive. We saw a ton of traffic, the foot traffic through doors and the sensors, were very active. We saw this many people, between these times, as opposed to this event that wasn't, so appealing and didn't work out well. And, the amount of money that you can save through that, I think is very, very beneficial.
Well, and you're hitting on a whole other dynamic of it, which is the employee experience and how you can elevate that. People are only going to come into the office if they know they're going to see their friends, if they want to collaborate for a meeting, or if the office has amazing amenities to offer them, great coffee, snacks, whatever, a great location. And so all of those things are super important, but the more you can supplement that experience with technology to make it even smoother, I think that's going to actually be the next frontier and kind of what we're starting to see now. Meeting rooms is a good example. Okay, I want to book a meeting room, but I want to be able to see if one's available immediately, and I don't want to walk past 5 that are vacant but show booked. And then if you take that more to kind of the perks, one of the things that I think was very innovative even before the pandemic, but is going to be more prevalent, is we're busy. Even when we're in the office, as much as we were there to socialize and to see our colleagues, like, we still have deadlines and we still have to get work done. Sitting at my desk, I don't want to get up and walk all the way to the gym or walk to the cafeteria only to see that there's like a massive queue that I'm going to have to wait in for 30 minutes. That's not an optimized use of my time. And so I want to be able to, from an employee experience app, see how busy those amenities are, make decisions on the fly without having to leave my desk. So I think the more we can kind of create an ecosystem where, yes, it's serving a specific real estate need for the leadership team, it's facilitating decision making, it's optimizing the performance of the space, but then, as an aggregator of data, that information is also flowing through to the hands of the employees on their cell phone so that they're empowered to make decisions. I think it's going to elevate the employee experience.
Absolutely. And I think that's like the next step in PropTech is like, right now it's so focused on the people spending the money, the developers, the property managers, the companies. How it evolves to be more user friendly and user appealing, I think, is going to be so important for companies. And it's going to be interesting because, how you sell that to companies and say like, hey, listen, like, this is going to be used as a tool for employee retention, it is going to be really neat, because what it comes down to is the users. Is this really appealing to it? You can sell them on it, but are employees really using it, and is it getting them to come into the office? Because that is going to be the most important and difficult thing for employers, is to get people back into the office. Obviously, safety is like at the forefront of that, but once we get beyond that, and for that matter, PropTech is there for the safety aspect as well. But how we get beyond that is going to be so fascinating. And I'll tell you what, whoever figures it out is going to make a lot of money.
To your point, though, just to add one thing, unfortunately, a lot of the time decisions are based on payback, right? And that is really hard to quantify.
Right, exactly.
And so I think to totally echo your point, it's going to be the next frontier, because they're going to have validated those investments can help their bottom line before that's going to become like the next shiny thing that makes it attractive.
Exactly.
And that's why those weren't what was the leading reasons for adoption of PropTech earlier on, is sometimes it's really hard to actually make those justifications.
Right. And not only that, but like, even from a user experience standpoint, like, people, if you tell somebody to use something, they're not just going to use it. Like, wayfinding is a great example. Like, wayfinding is a great technology in offices, but half the employees don't know how to use it, or don't even know it's available. So like, how you go about like making it like cool, I guess you could say, it is going to be very fascinating, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So that is one side of it, is how cool it is. But then the other side that we also need to, worry about and certainly take notice of is the privacy aspect, because, so much of our life right now we do make available, through the Facebooks and the Instagrams and, I'm thinking about a pair of shorts, and then I look at my Instagram, and all of a sudden Nike's selling me shorts.
Yeah.
So what we need to really understand through this too is like, how is privacy going to be a main function of this, making sure employees' data is safe, and not just the employees, but also company data remains safe. So, what are your thoughts on that portion of it?
Yeah, I think we are in the midst of a very challenging time for companies in that they want to make these investments. They're excited about the technology finally, but we're sort of teetering on this fine line between doing things that are in the best interest of the company and potentially entering into a surveillance state where we're making decisions that adversely affect our employees. And so I feel good working for a company like Density because privacy was actually part of the founding principles of the organization. And I've had the benefit being on the inside of participating in meetings where it continuously is brought up like, no, we don't want to go down that path because it would undermine our commitment to privacy. And by design, the technology is anonymous at the source. A lot of technologies anonymize, which means that they are collecting data. They are collecting photos. They're collecting videos of your space, but then they're using technology to anonymize it. I'd have some heartburn around that, especially with...
It's a touchy subject.
It's touchy,
really touchy.
Right? I think I would have a hard time getting up and going to work every day in that environment, but it's great for me just because everything we do is incapable of collecting any personally identifiable information. But to answer your question more broadly, I think organizations now have to kind of follow or look to what's happening with the Facebooks and the Instagrams. We all invited those companies into our lives via our phone 5 years ago. And I was like you, I was delighted when I would say, oh, I need new mascara. And all of a sudden, 15 amazing mascaras would present themselves to me while I was catching up with what my friends and family were doing on Instagram. Realizing now that that's because it was listening, it's collecting a whole bunch of data about me, and it's selling that. Facebook, less so some of like the Twitters of the world, but for sure Facebook has really been getting a lot of scrutiny in the last year, especially with regards to their lack of regard for privacy of their users. And I think real estate decision makers right now need to heed that because, yes, it may be more cost effective to just purchase a software that's going to run on a security camera in your space to do facial recognition. But 5 years out, what kind of reckoning are you going to have from your employees and pushback? So making decisions now that are privacy focused, whether or not there's the regulations in place or whether or not you've had any blowback from your employees. I think someone recently mentioned that it's a lot harder to earn back trust after you've lost it than to just retain trust. You're entering into a contract with your employees the day that they accept the offer to come and work for your company, and they are entrusting that you have their best interest. And so make those decisions today, protecting that privacy such that you don't have to pivot and respond to it down the road if it becomes something that they ask for.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to stem off that too is really working with, privacy-focused companies. I've seen Density's technology at work, and it is strictly that. Yeah. It's all like gray space, and you can see obviously that, there is like a person there, but you have no idea who that person is or what they're wearing or, even if they're male or female or, any other gender. It's completely private in that regard. So, yeah, that is extremely, extremely important. So Laura, thank you so much for this conversation today. It's been very informative and exciting. I think we have a lot to look forward to in the PropTech industry, so I'm hoping we can do this again someday.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jack.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we're looking forward to the next episode. Bye.
Be sure to subscribe to our podcast at theadvancedgrp.com. That's theadvancedgrp.com.